And this is where the story really starts to get rather interesting, because you just will not believe what it was that disabled this Ferrari. Hello everybody, welcome to number 27. Today I'm going to talk to you about my friend Metin and his experience with his absolutely beautiful Ferrari 355. Like many of us, Metin had always dreamed of having a Ferrari.
Get ready.
He's had a lot of cars, but the Ferrari, everyone has that in the back. It's an itch that you want to scratch. And his experience started a while ago when he bought a Ferrari 348. That wasn't a completely happy experience. He didn't like that car, he didn't get on with it very well. I've driven one myself, and although I actually really liked it, I can understand why he didn't. He's more used to Porsches, and the 348 in particular, it's got quite a plasticky interior, it's quite fragile, it doesn't really handle, and the engine, well, it does handle, but it doesn't handle as well as, say, a 355. And the engine doesn't feel as special as the later Ferraris either. It was a transition car really between this and then the new generation of Ferraris like the 360s. Having had such a bad experience with his 348, why is it then that Metin started looking again at other Ferraris? Well, I'm afraid it's all my fault, or rather, it is all the fault of the dashingly handsome InfluEnzo. Most of you will know the story behind this car, but just to cut it briefly in case you don't, I bought it online on an auction without having seen it. It was quite a ropey car. I've had loads of adventures and issues trying to get it run properly. A lot of people have been following, including Metin, and it gave him an appetite for another Ferrari. So he contacted me and said, well, what do you think? I'm sort of just started to look around, and my first reaction was, well, leave it well alone. Your experience with the 348 wasn't great. I think you like a more solid car. It's probably not the best idea, but he had it in his head by then, and he had a bit of money to spare, and he started looking around to see what he could find.
Jack, you're an inspiration. Pandemic purchase Ferrari InfluEnzo Mark II.
What he found was a rather beautiful, I can't remember what the colour that blue is called, but it looks amazing, 355 Spider. A little bit leggy by Ferrari standards, 60,000 miles, but as I've mentioned before, I really don't think mileage is a good indicator for these cars, or whether they should be bought or not. It hadn't been used very much for the last sort of couple of years, but it had had a bit of money spent in servicing in the last year, so the belts had been done, all the main things that you would normally look at. He managed to get it for a really good price. And the first day he drove it around and he was on top of the world. Fantastic car, super fun, brilliant to drive with the top down in this fabulous weather, sounded amazing. And although he noticed a few of the little quirks that you get in Ferraris of that era, so the sticky buttons and then the sort of scuttle shake that you get with this particular car with the Spider, he did really, he felt like he was starting to love it. It was, of course, too good to be true. And by the end of that first day of ownership, I got a call and a message saying, Ferrari's broken down, can't believe it. So what happened was that as he was driving it around, suddenly the steering went very heavy, and then the engine temperature started to go up, so he just switched it off, left it by the side of the road. When he spoke to me, I immediately thought auxiliary belt, because that's the power steering goes, engine temperature goes up, and it's one belt, I think, that does everything there, which includes the water pump, power steering, and so on. So, okay, you had your first breakdown within the first day of ownership of your shiny, beautiful new Ferrari 355, but to me it sounded like a pretty simple, quick fix. His local specialist was Bell Sport. They have a good reputation, so he had the car trailered over to them to take a look at and see what needed to be done. In the meantime, I'd looked it up online as well, and the failure of the auxiliary belt is actually quite a common problem with Ferraris, with 355s of that era. The tensioner that was originally used is known to fail, so it all made sense really. Although it had been serviced before and probably the belts had been changed, the actual tensioner, I'm not sure if there was a recall or not, but that hadn't been changed, and so the auxiliary belt dropped off. But at this stage, it's still going to be an engine out job to replace everything, check all the pulleys, make sure it's not a bad pulley. And so you might then as well do a full belt change as well. And when you take the Ferrari to some experts, you're going to expect some other things that came up. To cut a long story short, they took the engine out, did a lot of mechanical work to the 355, and at the end of it, Metin was faced with a £6,000 bill, which stings a little bit. Having said that, the original dealer who bought the car from him contributed to that somewhat, so that took some of the pain from it. So having had the trauma of the massive bill for his Ferrari from what seemed to be initially at least quite a simple fault, he was really looking forward to going and pick up the car and finally getting to driving it again, because after all, it is a beautiful car, it's summer, he does really like it. So he went and collected it, car was running extremely well, he was using it as much as possible. Next thing he did was go to the supermarket for a quick shop. When he came back outside, would you believe it, it just wouldn't start. And he thought that he'd been completely hit by the Ferrari curse, that was all, you know, started to wonder again, is it just, you know, have I done the wrong thing? And this is where the story really starts to get rather interesting, because you just will not believe what it was that disabled this Ferrari. So obviously the first thing to do, since the car had just been looked at and serviced by Bell Sport, was to give them a call. He called them up and said, look, the car's been running fine, I've just parked up in a supermarket and it just, nothing, it's completely dead. He said, you're not parked close to a phone mast by any chance, are you? Yes, actually, I am. There's a phone mast just over there. Ah, classic 355. You shouldn't really park them close to phone masts. What? You've got to be kidding me. Well, apparently, throughout the years, from when they were new, they had had calls from clients in London, you know, who were maybe parked by the BT Tower or close to other phone masts, and the cars just refused to start. And what it is that the radio frequencies interfere with the immobilizer. This only affects the cars with the 5.2 Bosch Metronic system, which I think is the later system that the 355s came with. It doesn't affect the cars with the 2.7. But essentially, if you park your car next to a phone mast, there's a very good chance that it just won't start again. Now, the normal fix for this is to get a code from Ferrari, and then you can do various things with the key to tap in the code, bypass the immobilizer, start your car and drive away. What Metin had to do, he didn't have that at the time, so what he had to do is call Bell Sport. They told him that's what it was, so they sent a recovery truck that took him 2 miles down the road. Once they got that far, switched the car on, works, no problem. So what an unbelievable fault. Of course, in the early 90s, mobile phones weren't as common, there weren't as many towers, but still unbelievable that you have a car and if you park it in the wrong place, you just can't start it up again. Hello everyone, sorry, I'm just going to butt into the main video quickly here just to ask you a favour. Metin's son is super passionate about cars and has an Instagram account. So if you want to see more of Metin's Ferraris and his various other cars and other cars that Gabriel has got, please have a look and please go on to his Instagram and subscribe. Thanks guys, back to the video. Luckily the car is now going, Metin's delighted with it, and I guess at the end of the day, it's a story that ends well. Just a quick update on the InfluEnzo as well. I'm looking around at various body shops to try and get that damage fixed. And I've also been to QV, so there's a video coming out about that, so keep your eyes open for that. Thank you all so much for watching once again, and see you for the next video.